Welcome, everyone. My name is Kate Venturini. This webinar is brought to you by Cooperative Extension, which is a part of the University of Rhode Island, responsible for actually bringing science out to the public to help folks solve problems. This webinar series will eventually hit all of these different focus areas that we work in. Tonight's webinar fits squarely within food systems and agriculture. We're really grateful that you're here. Without further ado, I will let Sandra introduce herself. She's one of the experts in New England on square foot gardening. We are very lucky to have her as a URI Master Gardener educator.
Okay. I want to let you know I've been a square foot gardener since before I actually became a master gardener. So I actually really don't know how to plant plants in rows. They always go in a square for me. And I'm going to talk about square foot gardening, the what, the why, the how of square foot gardening. So what is it? It was developed by a man called Mel Bartholomew. He was a retired engineer. He joined a community garden group, and he realized by July that nobody was coming, it wasn't getting watered, and it was tons and tons of weed, and no one wanted to be there. So he, being an engineer, decided there must be a better way. And this is the way he came up with. It's been tweaked a little over the years, and what I'm going to be teaching tonight is the final version of it. It uses raised beds divided into square feet by grids, and it's not a square foot garden unless it has a grid. It's been used successfully. He started a school program in every school in Utah where he lived. We use it here in Rhode Island. Some of the school garden mentors use it, and he's done it worldwide. It's been in Mexico, Guatemala, Australia, and they've used it there, called square meter gardening, and throughout the U.S. And it's been around for over 40 years. So his mission was basically he wanted to feed people, and he wanted to solve world hunger. So by teaching people around the globe how to grow enough food for themselves and their family with limited resources, expertise, time, and effort. So this is a really good way for somebody who doesn't know anything about gardening to start their own vegetable garden. So not unlike Mel, this year, I believe it's 3 years, we're going to be talking about hunger with the master gardeners, and we want to initiate, has launched to connect our residents to the local food system, and that includes growing a portion of their own food. So again, square foot gardening is an easy method to learn to use to grow your own food. So I hope everybody wants to try it. So why square foot gardening? And on the left, that's my square foot garden, and on the right is the Malin Center garden. And it's easy, it's efficient, and encourages planting with diversity. You can see in both of these pictures that it's not a whole row of one thing. It's very enjoyable. That encourages plant diversity, and it's versatile, and it's productive, and it's also so pretty, or it can be very pretty, as you can see from those pictures. So I'm going to give you some examples of the square foot gardens that I've been involved with just in the last 2 years. So up on the left this is the Welcome House Garden. They had those beds already there. They were built by Girl Scouts. And then they had those bamboo poles, so we just kind of prettied them up with some different colored tape. And we emptied the soil out of the beds that they had and added the Mel's mix, which you'll find out about. And on the right and up on the top is, that was about, I want to say September, October. And that was my project from my RN to BSN. This is another one we did. It was the Seed to Table program through URI Master Gardeners. And we had this group of people that started off with the first program of starting their own plants, and then we worked to building their own square foot garden. And this is all of them out there. And we used, we had limited resources. I actually brought the compost in the soil, and I think it's a 4x8, it looks like. We had a great time doing that. And this is the Malin Center at URI. These are my grad students. I was doing demonstration here for the plant sale. And I realized that one of the beds was already being used, and that's when we got together with I said if they want to use them all, then I would help them if they wanted to learn square foot gardening. And this, we just did this last year. We started it. There were a good bunch of people. And this is one of mine. This is along the road, and this is going to be a community garden this year, because I always get little text messages from my neighbors. Can I, about, do you have any basil, or do you have this? And I can never quite explain to them where it is. So this is all going, I just started planting all this with all kinds of herbs for the neighbors. This is going to be in the neighborhood herb garden. And I just want to point out the kitty litter buckets, because when we get to the watering, I want you to remember these buckets with the tops on them. And that was red okra, if you wanted to know what that plant was. Again, your veggie garden can be really pretty. And the guy from the Bahal wanted the okra. So the 10 basics of square foot gardening. You plant densely, as you can see by those photos. We do not waste space. We grow up. We have verticals for more productivity. And Kate and I were talking about butternut squash, growing that up. We did that at the Malin Center. You use Mel's Mix. It's a formula that you use, and we're going to be getting to that. You don't use garden soil. And you want your garden close to your house. It looks far from, this is what my 3 in the front, but it's really just up the driveway, and I come out and I see it, and people always go by and they're always commenting on it. And it's much easier for you to do what you need to do with your garden if it's close by. You're more likely to tend to it. Really, you only need 6 inches. If you wanted to do more for a longer carrots or potatoes, you can do 12, but you really don't need any more than that. Pretty much for most crops, it's 6 inches. And even carrots, they have shorter versions of carrots that you can do. You do not need any fertilizer. Your compost that's in the Mel's Mix is your fertilizer. And I have never used any kind of commercial fertilizer in my square foot gardens. And you want the aisles to be 3 feet apart. That's pretty much a good space so that you can move around, especially when the plants start to grow up and they get kind of spill over. 3 feet is a pretty good area, and it's less area for weeds to grow. You don't want to be stepping on your square foot garden. Provides enough room to move comfortably. That's all you're saying. And also you're stingy with your seeds. You plant carefully to make maximum use of the seed packet. And he encourages that you can save your seeds from a seed packet. I think a lettuce packet has like 1,000 seeds, which nobody needs that many seeds in 1 year, unless you're a farmer. We plant in squares. It's the most efficient way to plant, simplifies the planting and the care, and maximizes the yield. So if wherever you're sitting, if you look at the room that you're sitting in and you cut it in half and then cut it in half again, that's how much space you would need compared to a row garden, 20%. And it's not that row gardening is a bad thing. That it's a farmer's thing. They have big equipment that they use, and they need the rows to get it through, and they're looking for tons and tons of yield. It's just that for your backyard garden, you really don't need that much space to grow what you need for your family. And I'm going to show you how you can do that. And also, square foot gardening it rotates your crops just naturally. It's a natural rotation, and most of the squares can be planted 2 to 3 times in a gardening season with succession planting and late season crops. So this is Most, and he was joking around. I'm like, when am I going to ever need that picture? And there it is. How to become a square foot gardener in 8 steps. So you want to first plan your garden. You want to lay out your square foot garden, build your boxes and grids, build the box accessories like verticals, create the Mel's Mix growing medium, and then you're going to plant your garden, maintain it, and harvest it. So step 1 is planning. You're going to draw out your grid, and first you're going to determine how many boxes you need and what you want to plant. I really recommend planting things that you're going to eat. Sometimes I try something new just to try it, just to see if I can grow it. Like I did blue Hopi corn last year. But for the most part, I grow what I want to eat. A good guide is 1 4x4 box, which is 16 square feet, provides salad for 1 adult every day. 2 is daily vegetables, supper vegetables for that person, and 3 will give you extra if you want to preserve it, give it away. For a child, the box size is 3x3, which is 9 square feet. And this little helpful thing is someone I was talking about square foot gardening at a seminar, and they told me about this. So I don't, promote any gardeners or any gardener supply company, but this one has, if you go into this and you go under Kitchen Garden Planner, it's really helpful. If you look at this, the bottom is the box. So you put in what size box you have, and then the squares come up, and then at the top, it slides along to all the plants, and you just drag them down and drop them in the box, and then you can print that out, and you have your garden plan. They also have another, it's graph paper, and you put in your box size, you put in the size of your space. Say you had a 20 by 40 space. You put that space size in, and the graph paper comes up, and then you put in the size of your boxes, and you can actually drag them down and plan out your space with your boxes. And again, you can print that out, and it's a really helpful tool. I really like it. However, I did notice that some of the plants are not accurate for how many can be planted in that square. So I would refer to the Square Foot Gardening book if you want to make it as accurate as possible. So which vegetables go in which squares? So you want to make use of verticals, and with the fencing. Pole, beans, squash, cucumbers, even tomatoes can go up. You want to plant that on the outside, usually the north side, so it doesn't shade your box. You want to recycle each square as each vegetable is harvested. So say you started some radishes in the spring, and then they're done and you pull them up, then you're going to replant a second harvest and start with something like, then you do your summer, maybe put eggplant in there. And the vegetables that you're going to have a second harvest with, you want to plant where you can easily get to them. This whole square foot garden creates deliberate diversity by not planting adjoining grid squares with the same vegetable. So you mix them up. And it also helps with that, because if something does get one of your plants, say something's on one of your pepper plants, it's not going to go through the whole row because there is no row. Your other pepper plant might be three squares over. And you want to organize your plants so that the tall ones don't overshadow the shorter ones. The tall on the north side, the intermediate in the center, and the shorter plants in front. And these are just from the book. These are some simple starter gardens that they have in the book you can follow. There's salsa, salad, easy to grow, basic samplers. But it kind of gives you an idea how it would look. I will say you probably, don't overwhelm yourself. Start small, try it, see how it goes. And also don't forget the flowers. If you noticed in one of those slides, I have alyssum that hangs over the front of my box. I put it in there every year. The bees love it, and they help pollinate your vegetables. So laying out your square foot garden. First, you want to look at the location. You want to make sure, like I talked about before, that it's close to the house. You want to check your sunlight 6 to 8 hours away from trees and shrubs, because the roots will come up through those boxes. I can guarantee it because it happened to me. You want to avoid low-lying areas where you might get puddles or pooling water, and consider how near or far your water access is. And assess how much space you have and plan where the boxes will go. And that's what I told you, that kitchen garden planner. You can actually go in there and put in your space and put how many boxes you want and kind of slide them around and see how they fit and put your aisles in and everything. This picture was taken in June. And those onions, those really tall plants, had actually wintered over from the previous fall. So this is I found that my husband and I are looking at houses in the south, and this was in the pictures of the house, and I was like, look at those elevated beds, they're so great. Somebody made some really nice beds. And then I saw the next picture on the right, and I'm like, no wonder they look sad and mistreated, because who wants to walk out there to care for it? And that's why it should be close to the house. So building your boxes and your grids. Basically, you can build it out of pretty much anything except something that's treated. Somebody had asked me about building one out of a bookcase, which I thought is a great way of recycling it, but I would definitely get rid of whatever's on it, the polyurethane. You don't want anything that's painted on the inside that the paint can flake off. I do paint the outside of mine, and I paint the tops of the grids. Natural lumber, composites. The thing with composites, and I'll mention it when I show you another slide, is they can bow out. So I wouldn't make them more than 6 feet, and make sure they're supported in the center. Stone, brick, cement blocks, pretty much anything. Overseas when he goes, they make them just out of rocks or logs. But the key is putting the grid on, and you want to just be able to make sure you can have the grid. And you can see, without a grid, it's not a square foot garden, it's just another raised bed. And it just makes it, when you put that grid on, you can see like, oh, this is where I'm going to plant things. So up on the left, that's the welcome house. Someone donated the wood for the tops, and then that was a hardware store, and then another hardware store donated the paint. It was actually deck stain, and we painted it, we put the grids on it, and then we planted that one. In the middle at the top, so I'm also a school garden mentor and in Providence, and one of the teachers needed box beds, and we really have no money for anything. And I'm renovating my house, and when I went to look at tile, they were by the bin to be thrown out. And I asked him about it, and he said, he was like, take them. They have bottoms on them and everything. He's like, just take them if you want them. And the guy who's doing my house trimmed them up a little bit, and we're going to line them with fabric, the landscape fabric, and they'll be good to go. And they were free. So, and then on the right, that was another donated bed at the welcome house, and that's an elevated bed. Down underneath that are my 3 elevated beds that I just put together. I've decided that I'm going to go up, literally. Instead, I need something a little higher. I'm getting to that point. And down below is that's the bed you've seen. That's my front garden with the grids. Those are pretty much permanent. I nailed those on. And then in the middle is my neighbor, Annabella. And that was my project that I did to get certified for square foot gardening. And she's putting hers together. Pink is her favorite color. And then on the left at the bottom, again, and he recommends go to a construction site, see if they've got any leftover wood. This was from my house, the work I had done, and the contractor was nice enough to make 2 beds out of it for me. I think what I'm going to do is there's also some plywood left. I'm going to actually put the plywood on as a bottom and use these as a tabletop garden for those folks that have to use a wheelchair to get around in. So this will work perfect. And then one step up is the Malin Center Garden, and you can see. So that's what I was talking about, the composite. So these beds are really long. They're like 12, 14 feet long, and you can see how it's like a wave on the side. It bowed out. So there was no way we could, there was a way, but it was just going to be too cost prohibitive to make wooden grids for it, and just time consuming to make sure they were all even. So I got that lovely, I put the little insert on the left there. We used that and we just stapled it to the, and it came out really well, and it comes in all kinds of cool colors. We had bright orange and the green and yellow and purple and pink. And it was kind of fun to do. And this is that elevated bed at Welcome House before on the left, and then it was after all the residents of the clients at Welcome House decorated the square foot slats. They painted them all a different color, and that's how it looked when it was pretty full and growing really well. Building box accessories. So you can make all of these things, and there are directions for most of them in the square foot garden book. In the middle is the dome. That's a kid's square foot garden. That's 3 by 3. You can see it has 9 squares, and you just get PVC pipe. And I use short rebar, and I drive the rebar into the ground, and then I just slip the PVC pipe right over it. It works really well. And then you can use Remay or a light plastic, or even if you want to, I put heavy duty plastic, and I was actually growing spinach into December. And then you have the verticals on the right. That's a combination of vertical and the covered garden, which you also could use. I'm going to use it with my broccoli and stuff just to keep out the worms. I'm going to just put a light cover over it. And then down below, that's that Malin Center garden again. So what I did was I went to Tractor Supply and talked the guys into giving me a discount on their crumpled up cattle fencing. It's 4 feet by 16 feet. And I had those I had those fence stakes. Those are the ones with the little hooks on them. And we just hooked it to the plant stakes. The guys at the Malin Center garden kind of stomped on it to shape it a little bit. And then we put it in, and it went in beautifully. And if you look, so what we're doing this year, I got my little arrow if you guys can see it. We already did it actually. So we are going to we put them here, and then we brought them across to here. So we're actually going to have a nice, cute little like tunnel almost across the beds once everything's growing. Oops. And then the middle is another way it's galvanized pipe, and then you use the elbows at the top and just bring it across, and you attach it to the box. And that's garden netting, and I did put the little insert of it right there. It's that Vigoro garden netting, and it works real well. I've had mine up for a couple of years now. And then down on the left those are critter controls. You can just put that little fencing up around it. And then up top is actually almost like a cage you can make over it to keep them out. So this is the Mel's mix. It's what makes a square foot garden, and it's really truly what makes it work. And this is what it's composed of. It's a third of blended compost, and by blended, I mean different kinds of compost. There's the picture. There's cow manure. There's the ocean stuff with seaweed and shells, and I think it's crab shells and stuff like that. There's a mushroom. So you want a blended compost to start with. And then it's a third of the peat moss or coir. Coir is getting much more available now. Down on the right, those are bricks of it, and you just soak it. It's really hard to tell the difference between that and peat moss. It's just that peat moss is really not sustainable. It's coming from 100-year-old bogs, and eventually it's gonna just be used up. So the coconut coir is a really good alternative. And I did actually see a bag of it at the hydroponics garden center that we have on Jefferson Boulevard. And then vermiculite. And vermiculite is probably going to be your most expensive item that you use. But the vermiculite is good for about 10 years, and so is the peat moss. The only thing after, once you get this mix in there, the only thing after that you're going to add is compost. And because the compost is what the plants are going to use. The vermiculite and the coir and the peat moss basically just make it so it drains well, but also holds the water really well. And this is, you mix it and you blend it. And the next slide is these are the advantages of it. It's balanced in pH, and I actually had tested at the plant sale. I had it tested. I had a new batch of it, and it had a 7.1 pH. It was brand new. I hadn't used it at all yet. It's balanced in nutrients. There's no digging. It's always loose. It's always crumbly. It's easily worked. You can plant it at any time. And again, there's less watering because it holds moisture really well, but it drains well. And you don't need fertilizer. I never use fertilizer. I always use compost. The nutrients come from the compost. And I just took one of my beds apart that's been there about 10 years, and that's what it looked like. That's the Mel's mix. Beautiful soil.
Sandra, we have a a bunch of questions.
Sure.
I wonder if I could pose a couple to you.
Sure.
Great. So Maria asked, when you say plant densely, and we haven't gotten to the planting yet, but
Yeah.
said, I've heard you can crowd plants more closely together to keep out weeds. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so we'll talk about, the Mel's mix is pretty much sterile, so you shouldn't have weeds. The only things you're going to get are what blows in, pretty much. So I have, like, one of mine is planted close to a blue globe thistle, and sure enough, I get, little blue globe thistles coming up in it. And I also, I do use mulch around mine. I use straw, so I do mulch it. And I try to I mulch it as soon as, like, the plants are up and pretty well established, and I'll put the mulch in. And then also when in the fall, when everything's all done, I have 2 maple trees. I chop them up and I put a layer of maple leaves on the top. And but the denseness also will keep the weeds out, shades out the weeds.
Great. A couple other questions. Do you have a source for vermiculite in Rhode Island?
Yeah, Home Depot, believe it or not.
All right.
And Allen Seed Store has a good sized bag of that bag that I had. That's what I use.
Allen Seed on Route 2,
Allen Seed Stores is organic, I believe, and then
okay.
And then the one at the Home Depot has it, and that's the only. And it's not cheap. It's like $16 to $20 for that bag, but it's a one-time. That is going to be your biggest expense, pretty much. You just have to remember it's just a one-time thing. I talked to somebody in Massachusetts who was who had contacted me about square foot gardening, and she said she found a source in Virginia, but I guess they would have to be shipped.
Okay.
So go to,
You folks are asking, is compost something I can buy? Yes, definitely. And there's a lot of different products, and it's great. I would just say it's great to read the label. There's a question about, can homemade compost be used in place of commercial compost?
If you see this slide that's up, I really would encourage you to make your own compost. Even if you have to start with getting it from somewhere else, at the same time, start composting, because 1/3 of the trash that goes to our landfills is food waste.
Yes, that's one of the biggest problems of our time, I think, is diverting food waste.
Yeah.
And lots of
definitely compost your own.
Lots of great questions here. I'll do one more, Sandra, and then we can keep going. This is a tough one from Lynette. How much should I anticipate it will cost to make Mel's mix for a 4x4 bed?
Well, I'm going to show you how much. I have a formula, how much you need. So then you could probably figure out how much it will cost from what you need.
Okay, and I lied. I'll ask you one more.
That's a question that I've never had. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's great. Can you top off with Mel's mix of an existing raised bed to convert it?
So I had to do that at the Malin Center, because number one, those beds there's 7 of those beds. They're huge. And there was just no way that we could just do all. So because you really, the first 6 inches are really, because he tells you only really need 6 inches. I would, if I would go down to 6. That's what I did, a little bit more than that in those beds. And that's what we did. We put the Mel's mix on top.
Great. Yeah. So folks, you can visit, if you put 3 East Alumni Avenue, and I'll put it in the Q&A box, 3 East Alumni Avenue in Kingston on the URI campus. When Sandra's referring to the Malin Center garden, you can actually go there and look at it. Wear a mask, of course. It's now June 2nd, but that is a public demonstration garden. You can see Sandra's skills in action there. So
that's the grad student garden too. We call it that.
Grad student garden, or Malin Center, is at 3 East Alumni Avenue. You're welcome to visit.
It's looking pretty sad right now because we couldn't go visit.
I know.
But, the guys we're gonna plant this Saturday, so
great.
We're gonna get started with it.
We'll keep going. Thanks for the great questions, everyone.
So how much do you need? This is the question I always got, and I was like, oh, let's see. So this is how it's calculating the volume, the length times the width times the depth. So, and then you divide that by 3 because you have compost, you have the peat moss or the coir, and you have the vermiculite. So 1 5-gallon bucket is 0.668 cubic feet. So if you have a 4x4 by 6 inches, you need 8 cubic feet divided by 3. That's 4 buckets each. So that's how you could figure out how much it would cost for the, I'm trying to think how many, I don't know how much cubic feet are in the vermiculite. But that's a way to figure it out. And so 1 4x4 by 6 is 12 buckets of melt mix. 3 of the coir and 3 of the compost and 3 of the vermiculite. And I put on the bottom, peat moss is sold in 3.9 cubic feet, but it's compressed. So when it pops out of there, you're going to have 8 cubic feet, which is something that's good to know. Because if you thought you needed more than 3.9, you're going to buy more when you actually don't need more than that. And this is the next slide is from the book, and and there's your you can kind of pick your bed, and then you can see how much volume you have there. These beds at the bottom, they're shorter beds. Unless like if that bed was against a fence and you're just using one side of it, that's really good. But again, the Malin Center beds are really long. They're 12 to 14 feet long. And boy, when you want to do something on the other side, it's so tempting to try to step over the bed instead of walking around. So I don't really recommend, a bigger bed than 8 feet, unless you really want to get a lot of exercise. But it's just that, when you really don't have a 4 feet, or at least I don't. I can't step across 4 feet, and you always seem to land in it. And that's the whole idea, is you don't want to land in it. You don't want to compact the soil. So we're going to start with what you need to plant, and this is it. You need a trowel, you need a pencil, scissors, and a water bucket. And this is where I'm going to talk about the water bucket, because it's for the watering. That's when I showed you those kitty litter boxes. They have a top on them, and they're really nice. I have to say they're really nice buckets. The guy got my lawnmower compost had like 10 of them, and I was like, I recognize those. He goes, oh, these are such great buckets. They're great to hold. They have a great handle, and they have a lid that snaps. So then you can avoid having mosquito problems, and we all know that it's a real problem. So if you have those buckets with the lid on them, you don't have to worry about the mosquitoes getting in there and breeding. So the trowel is just to put it in your compost when you start to plant. The pencil is to make your seed holes, and the scissors are for because you only use 2 to 3 seeds per hole. When they come up, you want to use your scissors to snip off every one but one. And the water buckets for watering. So this is your planting guide for your square foot garden. And these are the number of plants per square is based on the size of the plant. So 1, 4, 9, and 16. Those are your square foot garden. And that's when I was saying about the planting count thing at Gardener Supply. It's a little bit off. It's not, some of the plants they have are not it's not the right number. So I would just refer to the Square Foot Gardening book or look it up online. At the Square Foot Gardening Foundation, they do have a website. There is a Square Foot Gardening Foundation that does a lot of good deeds with gardening. So extra large, that's the Ichiban eggplant, 1 plant per square. And now I think if you look down at the very bottom of that eggplant, the alyssum had kind of creeped from the one in front. And then on the right, that's lettuce. That's 2 squares of lettuce. So there's actually 8 plants there. So there's the 2 red, then the, looks like maybe it's oak leaf behind it. No, I think it's just green, black-seeded Simpson. And then there's 4 of the romaine behind that. So that's actually 2 squares. So you can see that is very densely planted. There's not going to be much weed in there. And then the medium is 9 beans, green beans. The bush green beans is 9. That would be something that would be 9. And then the small is 16 per square. And that's carrots, radishes are 16. And this is all in the book, or you can look it up online. You can go at the Square Foot Gardening Foundation. It's all there. And this is from, these are both the right and the left picture from the book. So when you divide your squares, 1, 4, 9, 16 is the number of plants in each square based on what you want to plant. So as we said, you have your extra large, your medium, and your small. And that's kind of up on the right, the plant spacing gives you an idea of what needs 1 tomatoes need 1 also. Swiss chard is 4, spinach 9, beans 9, beets 9, and then what is that? Carrots, radishes, and onions. You can do 16. And on the left, it shows you how to do, of course, 1, you just put, you're using a finger, but that's what the pencil's for. It's the pencil. And then the 4, you just do a cross and 1 in the middle of each of those squares. And the 9, you just use those 2 fingers down and 2 fingers across, and you have 9. And for the 16, you just do the cross and you put 4 in each of those little squares. When I was talking to the grad students at the Mountain Center about square foot gardening, which they had no idea what that was, one of the guys measured all the beds, and that's actually his writing. He measured all those beds, and you can see their big beds, 18 feet, 15 feet, and he came out a total of 406 square feet. And he said to me, that's 406 plants. And I said, no, if you put something with 16 in there, you've got a lot more than 406 plants. So it really brought it home to them, and it really made it sensible to them. Like it made, it made sense how it was going to work. So the seeds, you just want to put 2 to 3 in the holes, and then after they germinate, you're going to leave the strongest and cut it. Any other ones, which is so hard to do, cut it to the ground with your scissors. So when maintaining your garden, there's really not much weeding, and if there is something that blows in there, I just use 2 fingers, it pulls right out. The Mel's mix contains no weed seeds, and most of them are, what blow in. Feeding the compost in the mix is your fertilizer. Mulching, I do use mulch, and it does minimize any weeds that do take up residence. And watering, you don't want to, a lot of people I see go out there with the hose and they just spray the whole thing for 5 minutes and then they're done. It causes the plant to get, they can get fungus. You want to keep them as dry as you can. So you want to water at the base of your plants where the roots are located. And the Mel's mix, again, is formulated to absorb and hold moisture. And not all the plants need to be watered at the same time. That's the reason you keep it close to your house, so you can keep an eye on everything. And if something looks a little like it needs water and others don't, you just water that one square. And the watering, so I keep those buckets near, I fill them up, and then I just let them stand so they get nice and warm. And they do have the tops on them, so I don't have to worry about mosquitoes. I water by hand, and you just, again, just right at the bottom of the plant, you just have your cup and water in it. And it really does, when you're down there looking at your plant and you're watering it, you really get to know it. You can head off any diseases that, that might be starting. You can see it instead of, going out there one day and all your beans are eaten up or something. If you see one, again, because of the diversity and not everything's planted together, if you see one plant that's starting to get a little bit chewed or something, you're going to catch it early if you're there watering by hand, looking it over. And also, when I'm watering by hand, I see that little bit of crabgrass that's starting to come, that blew in there, I can just pluck it out with my fingers. So the watering by hand is really a good way to go. It can, I don't want to say tedious, but some people, you just want to turn on the hose and be done with it. And so the next slide will allow you to do that. These are watering options that come in, and it also makes the grid too. These are irrigation systems. The one down on the right is actually PVC pipe that, again, somebody I met at a Square for Gardening seminar told me that he had built this, and he just drilled holes in the PVC pipe, and then he did the elbows. I'm not sure, I can't remember how he got the hose. He must have figured out how to put a hose attachment on it. And then the one down on the left is actually commercially produced. So you have your grids and you have your watering system. But again, I really encourage people who do Square for Gardening to be out there every day looking at your plants, watching it grow, checking for bugs, and go out at night because those bugs come out at night. Right? People think I'm crazy, but I do. I go out with a flashlight. Crickets, they come out at night. They love stuff.
Sandra, before we leave the water,
sure.
Why do you use warmer water? And also, how do you know when to water? These are great questions, everyone.
Well, I use the warm water just because I think it's better than, it's warm, and it's when you think about it's warm out, I should say. When you think about eggplants and peppers and tomatoes, they like it hot. They want heat, and then you're going and you're putting cold water on them, and you're cooling the soil down, and so that's why the warm water is just really nice to use. When I'm growing my seedlings, I actually use warm water too for them. What was the other question?
How do you know when to water? A couple people asked this.
So if one of the plants looks a little droopy, that's a definite I need water. Check your soil, just stick your finger down on the side and see how, if it's starting to dry out a little bit. You can do that. You want to keep it pretty evenly moist. You don't want it to be soggy, but you do want it to keep it pretty evenly moist for the veggies.
Yeah, and generally what we tell folks is, to the extent that you can keep the plant comfortable, it'll put most of its energy into producing fruit. If it's having to worry about having enough water, then it might not be producing enough. So as Sandra's saying, getting to know the plants, we talk about this a lot. The more time you spend outside and with these plants, the better off they are, and I think you are too.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. So harvesting. So especially if you're a beginner gardener and you're used to eating on your vegetables from the store, like the tomatoes, and I'm not sure that everyone really knows when a tomato is really truly ripe. And some of those tomatoes, like the green zebra, it's hard for me to even figure it out because they're just different colors. So get your knowledge about when plants are ripening and when they're ready to be picked. I think the eggplant, if you touch it, it should give a little bit. Just those little things, because you don't want to pick it too soon, and then of course you don't want it to be overripe. Plant in succession. So one thing follows another. Like I said, when your radishes are done, put in something new and different so that you're doing that diversity. But also for succession for me means I leave maybe, it depends. So say you're a really big green bean eater, you love green beans, I'll do one square of green beans, and then a week later I'll have saved a square open, and I'll put in another green beans there, and then a week later I'll do another green bean in another square. So you don't have to plant all your squares at once if you're thinking about something like that you really like, but you don't want it all at once. It's a good way. Harvest your leafy vegetables, your lettuces continuously. It helps delay the set of flower heads, or bolting as they call it. I just go out and just pick off what I need for that night, pretty much. And when you're finished harvesting the square, and this is an important part, you remove all the debris, you remove the plant, if it's something that's finished, like the lettuce that has bolted. Well, I will tell you a little trick that my llama farmer told me, who's the Yankee farmer, who also, I guess he heard it from a farmer before him. If you cut your lettuce heads down, if you cut it off like you would cut the whole lettuce head off, and you score that, you actually will grow more lettuce. It's not going to be a big, huge head, but it actually will grow more lettuce. And he showed me in his garden. I was like, wow, and I have done it, and it does. It grows more lettuce. So you wouldn't really have to plant another lettuce there. You just score the top. So again, when you're finishing harvesting, you're going to remove the plant. You're going to mix in a trowel of compost. That's what your trowel's for. You're going to mix in that compost. That's your fertilizer for your next plant. And then you're going to plant with a new and different crop. And it's not uncommon to be able to grow 3 plantings of things. You have your spring, you have your root crop, and then the fruit crop, and then the leaf crop. Or you could do the opposite for the spring, do your leaf crop. Or if you have 4 squares, you can do both of them and then do both of them again in the fall. Again, like I said, I was able to grow spinach up until December. My little bed had snow on it. I have had kale and leeks and onions winter over. And I don't know, it hasn't really, this year, I would say it was a warm winter, but I've had it winter over in other winters too. And what happens with the kale is you can get a good harvest from it the first like March into April, but then it does bolt. And I let it flower for the pollinators, and then I take it out and plant some new stuff. So this is an example of one box, a 4x4 box, what you can plant in one 4x4 box. And this is a lot, if you look at it, it's a lot of spring things. So this is not the box for the whole season. This is going to be pretty much your spring box. And all these things are going to get done, and then you're going to replant for your summer. It's pretty amazing what it can hold. We, the Mound Center, we didn't record how much we actually produced, but they were eating from it every day. And that's those are the three on the from the under the harvest to around. Those were from the Mound Center. And one comment I want to make, because people always ask about companion planting, and I always say, because we're research-based, and there really is no research on companion planting, but everybody has things that their grandmother used. But I will say that cauliflower on the right, one of the beds had lemon gem marigolds in a Z through the bed, all the way from the front to the back. And if you've ever smelled them, they smell like lemon pledge. And those cauliflower in that bed were absolutely beautiful and untouched. And across from them was a bed with cauliflower with no marigolds, and they got eaten alive. So you can call that companion planting. It did, and I think we're going to probably try and do that again this year. And this was our spring harvest, the one in the bottom from the Malin Center. It's bok choy and Swiss chard and radishes and some lettuce. And that's my strawberries from June. Got to fight the birds for them. And then Annabella's garden. So Annabella is my neighbor, and I believe she was 3. And it's a little out of sequence because I couldn't plan it with her because she was so excited to get the pink box and the decorations that she wanted to do that first. But normally we would have done the planting first. Her dad did do all the sticks with her the night before for what she wanted to plant. what I didn't mention, if you wanted to make a deeper space, that was called a top hat. That was that little one square that added on to the top of the other square, called a top hat, and it makes it deeper. So that's another option.
What's at the bottom of the raised bed? How are you preventing animals from getting in?
The bottom is if you see Annabella's, it's fabric. What we do.
Okay.
Landscape fabric is what you put on the bottom. When you prepare your space, if it has no bottom, it's landscape fabric. There are critter cages. You can do that to cover it, to keep out. I did see in Mother Earth News, they had built a garden out of cinder blocks, but they did it up like 2 or 3 cinder blocks up, and then they put chicken wire on the bottom of it and on the inside and kind of folded it up, not all the way up, but just enough. And it was to keep the groundhogs out. And it did, because they couldn't climb over it. It was just high enough, and then they couldn't get under it. And that worked really, really well. And again, because you only need 6 to 12 inches, you fill it with something else, and then the last top, do your Mel's mix.
That's great. Scoring the lettuce. What does that mean?
Yeah. So how do I explain this? So so say it's a head of lettuce that you're growing, and then you cut at the bottom. You cut the whole head off. And then you've got that little round circle that's the lettuce where it goes in the ground. You just take your knife and you just cut right down the middle of it, just a little bit. And it gets it to generate more lettuce leaves. It's not a whole huge head, but you do actually get more lettuce from it. I know, that's what I said.
A
but
survival mechanism, I think. Yeah.
Well, it's a big thing now. People are using like carrot tops and stuff like that. They're there's a word for it, regrowing things, but it's a big movement.
Deterring chipmunks.
Oh, I know. Well, I don't want to say the bad word, but they are the bad word.
Yeah.
I have 3 dogs. I confess, I have 3 dogs and a cat. So I don't have those issues. And I have bunnies too, but they don't seem to bother it. I don't, even those ones in the front by the road. They don't. I used to take the dogs out just to walk at 10 o'clock, and that's usually when they would see them, and maybe that's what deterred them from doing it. But even now, they don't seem to bother it, and I don't know why. But try those lemon gem marigolds. Those things they're really terrible stuff. I mean, unless you like lemon pledge, but. They worked. They did work for that. But yeah, the critters are a problem. And if you go on, you can do. And I think even if you do the hoops with the PVC pipe and just cover it with Rime, which is the fabric that you use for gardening. It's a really light fabric. It will keep the bugs out, and maybe that would just be enough to keep the little guys out too. I have to say, at the Malin Center Garden, there was a bunny in there, but he didn't seem to eat a lot. And there also, I think it was squirrels. So I told you about that blue Hopi corn I grew. Well, it turned out that was the sacrificial lamb. That's whatever was in there ate, and they ate all of it. Well, as soon as it was ripe, they ate it all, and that was the sacrificial lamb. I guess that was enough. They decided they didn't need anything else, but they ate that. So that's another option. Plant something somewhere for your critters. It might work. It might not, but it did there. I think that blue Hopi corn was just something they'd never seen, but it was corn, and they thought it was great. They cleaned off every single ear.
Don't forget you can grow up.
So the tomatoes would go on the north side, and you can use that vertical for your tomatoes. You just tie them to it or weave them through it.
So what I would encourage folks to do is go to squarefootgardening.org, which is the Square Foot Gardening Foundation. That's where you can find information about the book that Sandra mentioned a bunch of times. Thank you for doing this, and thank you to all of you for joining us